And before we start, all right. Okay, we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. I am Rebecca Aguilar, president of the Society of Professional Journalists. Welcome to the MMJ Safety First Town Hall. We heard the call from the MMJs after MMJ Tori Yorgi was hit by a vehicle live on television. We're glad she's okay. But she was just the latest MMJ to be involved in a dangerous situation. SPJ and the SPJ Georgia chapter has put together a panel of experts today to address the MMJ system, also known as one-man bands or one-woman bands. We hope to come up with solutions and suggestions to help revamp and retool what MMJs have to deal with every day. We have some ground rules, so listen up. Be positive and productive. Respect the opinions of others, including in that chat. So let me introduce our panelists. Sherry Darden has been a consultant since 1999. She is a human resource subject matter expert with 17 years experience. Today, she is the CEO of her Dallas company and goes around the country teaching other HR professionals how to do a better job. Welcome, Sherry. Say hello. All right. Amy Sullivan is the news director at KATV News in Little Rock, Arkansas. She started in the news industry as a sports columnist for a newspaper in Louisiana before making the move to television news as a producer. She has worked at a couple TV stations in Texas before her move to Little Rock. She is also an Air Force veteran. Welcome, Amy. Say hello. Okay. And yeah, I can hear your voice, so please say hello. Drew Shenkman is Assistant General Counsel with CNN, serving as a newsroom attorney, working with CNN journalists in the US and around the world. He provides pre-publication advice and counseling on content and news gathering, including advice on access to information under state and federal laws. Welcome, Drew.
Hello, nice to see everybody.
Shamarria Morrison is a reporter at MMJ at WCNC-TV in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her friends call her Shay. She has also worked at various TV stations. She's recently started an open letter to stop MMJs from solo live shots. Welcome, Shay. All right. And by the way, Shay just told us she is MMJ today. She was called on assignment, so she'll be joining us, but the realities of MMJ, I'm sure we'll hear from her later. Chris Post is a photojournalist and media safety educator. He has worked as a first responder for over 20 years before becoming a photojournalist. He is the chair of the Safety and Security Committee for the NPPA. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Rebecca. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Jared Oliver worked as an MMJ at 2 television stations, but now he works in Orlando, Florida at WFTV, where he is the weekend sports anchor and sports reporter. And now he goes out with a photojournalist. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello to everyone. I appreciate you guys having me part of this conversation.
Of course. Also helping me today will be Nicolle Sartain. She's the president of the SPJ Georgia chapter. Nicolle will be providing us with her questions from you. I'm sorry, your questions. Yes, we want to hear from you. So put them in the chat. And we will be calling on several people in the audience that are doing remarkable things in the area of MMJs. So here's my first question, panelists. I'd like to know from each of you what you thought when you saw the video, when you saw that live shot and the MMJ hit on live TV. What did you think immediately? Amy, you're a news director. Let's start with you.
As a news director, my first thought was, why didn't they cut the video? The whole thing played out live on TV. And then as a parent, her safety, and then also wondering why she was out in the dark by herself. It just didn't make any sense to me for a water main break.
Mm-hmm. Drew, you're the attorney. What were you thinking?
I did not see that live, but I did see it, like we all did on the internet later. And what went through my mind was what goes through my mind anytime I see something like that happen live, which is forgetting what the story is, but how do we get this person to safety and how do we get safety to them? It brought back memories of when one of our reporters was arrested live on television in Minneapolis about a year ago or so. And really it wasn't anything having to do with, at that point, getting the shot. It was getting him to safety. And it just so happened that keeping that live on television in that instance was important to getting him to safety, but in the other instance, maybe not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sherry, you're a human resource expert. What were you thinking?
Well, as a human being in human resources, is she okay? That should not have been televised. And I know we're in the world of shock TV, but that it should have been cut. Is she okay? And we need to now start hauling, you know what, to make sure that this never happens again.
Thank you for that. Chris, you're the safety expert. You train people in this area. What did you think?
I was shocked. And when she dropped real quick and she popped back up, she said, "Oh, no, I'm okay. I'm okay." Well, I think all of us have had issues where maybe we wiped out, we tripped or something like that accidentally, and we pop back up and yeah, I'm okay. But maybe we really aren't. And I think it should have been cut. She was clearly had some sort of injuries. She was hit by a car, even if she didn't feel it right then and there. She should have been, quickly gotten some help and some assistance, and hopefully, that did happen rather quickly. But I was surprised, and I thought the live shot should have been killed right away. As a photojournalist, I've had my live shot killed because the batteries in the wireless mic died. So little things like that. Why would they not cut the live shot when somebody on the air live got hit by a car?
Thank you for that. Jared, you're a former MMJ. Again, Shay is MMJing right now. I'd go to her, but she's still working. But you're a former MMJ. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw it after it made its rounds on social media like everybody else. And like all live television, it's all very fluid and it's all happening, in real time. When I saw that she was hit by a car, I thought, oh, she could have potentially been killed on live television. As far as the anchor, people were having the conversation of, well, it didn't look like he had that much concern. I don't know if he had a playback system or not in the studio or not, but my immediate reaction is this is why I don't like the idea of the MMJ role, just because, you put yourself, there are so many elements you can't control around you. People, cars, weather, just safety concerns. I've always thought that, if it's before 7 a.m. or if it's after 9 p.m., I think someone should always be with a reporter. So, that was my initial reaction. This is why I've never been a fan of the MMJ role, but I do understand why the business has gone the way it's gone.
I like that input. For the record, Tori, the MMJ that was hit by the vehicle, she has told network, she's told local, she's been written up that, she chose that location, that her station and her news director always said safety first, and that they even, the news director even took her to the hospital. So she is one that says that her station does listen to her, and just to put that out there. But this is gone beyond what happened to her. This again brought the attention of MMJs and the situations they're in, or they may put themselves in, and the bigger discussion. So let me go over to Drew real quick. I know at CNN, you guys have all the bells and whistles. You have reporters, you have photographers, even security guards with you. But one of the things that you told me when we spoke earlier was that it is important to build that respect, that trust, that you listen. What kind of things do you tell, for example, or advise your producers and news managers that applies to your crews? And in this case here, applies to news directors and producers who deal with MMJs in different markets. Tell us about that. What questions do you have them ask?
Sure. So yeah, like you said, it's hard. Why is the CNN lawyer going to come up and preach to us about, he's got all these resources and he can call 17 different people in security and all that great stuff. And that's all true. But as I told you, Rebecca, yesterday, the principles are the same, regardless of how much resources you have or don't have, whether you're a solo journalist or whether you're on a team of 5. And the principle for us is, most importantly, if you're going into a dangerous situation, and granted, doing a stand up on the side of the street isn't inherently itself always the dangerous situation, but when you know you're going into a dangerous situation, and we do that at CNN, right? We go into war zones, we cover natural disasters, we cover all kinds of civil unrest and disturbances and riots and you name it, right? The key is that no one goes unless they want to. That is a universal rule for us. And that is something that is imparted at every single level of the organization, such that the producer who may be assigned to that project knows that they can raise their hand and wouldn't be retaliated against, right? Saying, I just don't feel comfortable doing this assignment. Now, again, we have the resource where I can say, all right, that producer's going to come out and this other one's going to come in. And maybe if you're doing a weekend show with, a small budget and not few number of people, that may not be possible as much, but then those are also discussions that you have to have internally. Is this something we ought to be doing in a dangerous situation? So we really listen to the journalists at all levels, and we have open communication at all levels, so much that we have a legal hotline to handle things like a journalist getting arrested, and they do call us when that happens. But we're also here for them if they feel unsafe or they need assistance in that regard. We can help plug them into the right places. Again, that's a resource thing that some of the smaller organizations may not have, but the universal rule is nobody does anything that they don't feel comfortable doing, and we listen to each other, and that is the biggest protection that we can have from the unknown, whether you're in a war zone, natural disaster, or, God forbid, you're just doing a stand up on the side of the road, somebody hits you with their car.
Thank you for that. So let me go over to, I don't know again if Shay, but we'll go with Jared. Jared, here's the thing. Why don't MMJs, speak up, or, our MMJs, and again, I hate to put everything on your shoulder because you are a former MMJ, but you did it, in two different markets. Do you think MMJs are good at building that trust and relationship? Because I know that, I've been on live shots and I've never been an MMJ. Fortunately, my 28 years in TV news, I had a photojournalist with me. But I know there were times that I would say, hey, I don't think we should be here. And I would hear from the producer, hey, you're slotted into my live shot. You need to do it. What do MMJs do to build that trust and relationship with producers? What do you think? Jared?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We kind of chatted a little bit yesterday about this. And I think when it comes to the reporter and the producer relationship, it's, for example, if there's breaking news in a local TV, if there's breaking news, it's right before the 10 o'clock show. And let's say if there was a shooting or an accident at an intersection, let's go with shooting. And you want to get your nighttime reporter out there as fast as you can. But you also, the reporter may have some safety concerns, especially if it's in an area that's not the safest or not the best. So, there comes a point where, yes, you want to be first, you want to be accurate, but also, do you want to put our employee in jeopardy? And so I think people in the business, like we talked about yesterday, people are on autopilot in the newsroom and just on the daily turn of the news cycle. And therefore, we don't think about the dangers that could happen to the person that's out there or the people that are out there, because like I said, there are so many elements you can't control. And then, if you're in a small market, if you go out there, you're setting up a live shot, you're in an area where there was just a crime scene or something that bad happened. And so I think producers and reporters have to kind of step out of themselves, or out of their own shells of just being on autopilot throughout the day, and just say, all right, well, is this a safety concern for you? Because you're the one going out there. We don't have a photographer for you. He's out doing something else. And, obviously, of course, management or executives or whatever the case may be, it's always a goal to be first and be accurate in local television or anywhere. But I think you just have to consider the people's well-being a lot of times. And I think just throughout the daily turn of news, sometimes that gets lost.
Let me turn over to Amy Sullivan. You're a news director. One of the things that I find very unique about you is that you have your producers go out with MMJs to learn the job? Is that in an effort, again, to build that respect, that trust, and that listening, point of view from both sides? Tell me about that.
It's more of a getting, so they understand what's being expected of the MMJ. So when they have those unreasonable asks, they understand when the MMJ says, I can't do this, they don't have to necessarily question their integrity. They can say, okay, yeah, I've seen what you can do. I understand that this is a different ask, but how can we still accomplish that? So it's also building a relationship between the two so that they can try and brainstorm to still accomplish what they want for the newscast, but letting them step back and say, hey, we can't make this particular thing happen.
And how have you seen it? What have been the results? I mean, are you seeing that there's that concrete trust and then the product is even better?
There's less pushback. There's more understanding. There isn't the producer running to the manager saying, well, I want this, and so-and-so said no. It's more of a collaborative effort. Okay, can you maybe move to a different location, or can you shoot it from your vehicle, or offering a different solution that could help keep someone safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what let me just jump in here, as an HR person. And so that is one of the things where before I became self-employed, some of the larger employers that I worked for, we made it a requirement for that cross-training, if you will. And I'm probably saying it out of industry, but kind of backing up what Amy is talking about when it comes into that know, like, and trust factor. It's hard to trust on either end when you don't know what the other person is going through. And so making that a requirement, walking a mile in somebody's shoes from the top down. I work with some worldwide companies and I am not their friend, because when you work with me, I'm not your friend. I'm there to get you results. And so with that being said, I make them uncomfortable. Yeah, roll up your sleeves, get out of the suit, roll up your sleeves, get out there in that, 2 inches of ice and get out there with people and know, even if it's not even just about the safety, it's just about the feeling. Can I do this? What other distractions, in addition to safety, what other distractions do I have? So I think in the strength in numbers, and I've been watching the chat, and some people are like, well, why not just not do it? Well, you're there and let me just say this and I know you guys are probably going to say cushy HR person who sits in an office and all of that good stuff. Let me just say my hat is off to you to go out and report what's going on out there. It is not for the faint at heart, and I salute you for everything that you do. So that's not an option to say just not do it. The positions that you have are there for a reason, because we need that coverage. So that's not an option. So we have to get in numbers, and I say we, because I'm going to be in the trenches here with you, is to say, walk a mile in my shoes. And so again, my hat is off to Amy by making that a common practice of, hey, get out here with me and see, so that, like she said, and like Chris said, when I say as an MMJ, hey, this isn't quite, something's not quite right. I don't feel like knocking on the door of a predator at 2 o'clock in the morning for that. You need to go out here with me so you can hear, you can see, you can smell. So I just wanted to jump in there and say that should be more the norm for people to request that, even from an HR standpoint, because you have a right to do that.
And I think you make many valid points. Thank God for HR people like you. And I hope that other HR people would also push that same thought process to managers and to producers, that kind of thing. And by the way, for the record, I did hear from many MMJs. They love their jobs. They love their station. They love their managers. They're respected. They're heard. And one of the things I promised several of them is this is not to bash the MMJ system. And there are places out there where there are news directors and producers who, I mean, it's beautiful. MMJs have it made. You get to shoot your own stories and feel that vibe. Yes, but I also heard twice as many MMJs who are miserable and they feel like puppets without a voice. So I just wanted to put that out there. I heard from both sides. And I also heard from people, especially photojournalists, who are like, well, get rid of the MMJ system, delete it. Look, our objective here is to make it better. I would love to say that we can get rid of it, but these are major media companies who maybe one day they will, but we have to have baby steps. We have to start somewhere. This is why SPJ started this conversation. So I would love to go poof, MMJ system gone, but it's not going to happen. Let's play in the real world. So I don't know who's saying what in the chat. I can't look at it while I'm running this right now, but I just wanted to put it out there because there are many MMJs in shops that are wonderful, and there are many managers and producers out there. I've worked with them that are great people, and I applaud you. I applaud you for making sure MMJs are thriving and surviving.
Hey,
So
Rebecca, can I add something to what Amy said? Because I love that
Sure,
idea
go
of
ahead.
living a moment in somebody else's shoes. And as a lawyer, some of my most important lessons come from actually, having visited some of our journalists around the country, right, in action, not necessarily in the scariest moments, right, but seeing how TV is made and not just being the lawyer from the sidelines is really important. And so the same can be said for a news director who maybe did it 20 years ago, but isn't doing it on the day-to-day basis now. But even just to go back to what I said earlier about, calling yourself out and saying, well, this isn't for me. Okay, maybe you were the journalist who said, I want to go there, right? And this was your moment to shine, but you found yourself in a scary situation, even though you wanted to be there. So what are you going to do, right? You can't tap out at that point. But you're talking to a news director at that moment. You need empathy from that news director, from the lawyer, from the HR person, whatever. And whether you get that sort of experience that Amy suggested, which I think is amazing, or not, being empathetic and listening to that human being on the other side of the IFB is critical, right, to understanding what they need in that moment. Because what you need, a really good shot of a fire, is not necessarily what that person needs in that moment. And you gotta listen and be empathetic to that and know that there's a line and you know what you think the line is, but they really know because they're there, right? And they know that if you get any closer to that fire, the camera lens will actually melt, right? And so we're not going to do that. So listening and being empathetic to that is so important.
Let me jump in, Drew. One of the things that you did share with me, and I know, again, some of your reporters just happened to be at the insurrection without their camera crews, and they were calling you. Share that, because in my opinion, you took a moment for them over the story. Please share that.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into any specifics, I can tell you that, one of our folks who was with the team down on the mall, and again, we team everybody up and we have security and we're very, thorough and all of that, but our bureau is not far from Capitol Hill. And so one of them had sort of separated and was walking towards the bureau and had seen some of the first, people who were going over some outer barricades. So, I got a phone call at that moment from this person, can I go past here and can I go into the Capitol and all that? And my first question to him wasn't anything related to the legal advice. It was, well, what do you want to do? So that I understood how to cater the legal advice. And then, he said, I don't really feel that safe because I don't have my security guard. And I said, well, what do you want to do? I asked him again. So I probably want to go back and get security. I think that's a great idea, right? And he did. And so, letting the person on the other end of that phone call lead, right? And you giving the advice, whether you're a lawyer or a news director or whomever you are on the other end, letting them sort of guide what's actually happening on the ground is really critical.
And that's what's important here, I think. Just taking the moment to ask that question. What do you want to do? How are you feeling? Drew could have easily thought, okay, man, we're going to get great video. We're going to get this. It wasn't the video first or the story first, which was a big, important thing. It was about you. How are you feeling? Which we can apply to the MMJ system. One question. Let me tell you, and I know many of you journalists out there, you know what I'm talking about. When I can talk to a producer and I say, hey, I can't be here, and they trust me, believe me, I'm going to bust my butt for them every time, anytime, because I know they heard me and they respected me and my safety was important. So just something out there to put out there. I want to turn to Chris. Chris is, he's got a safety video. It's very good. But I think we're beyond that. And one of the things that Chris teaches as one of the safety experts, and he does a lot of work with NPPA and RTDNA, is that, in this case, we're now beyond the video, right?
Yes.
One of the things you teach is situational awareness for the MMJs. Watch your environment, see what's going on. What kind of advice do you have for producers and news managers? Because they also need, I guess, situational awareness.
Well, yeah, and kind of backing up a few minutes, what Amy and Drew and Sherry talked about with the visibility of what it's like to work in the field is so important. I can think back to when I worked as a medic on the ambulance. We would regularly take out ER doctors and ER nurses, and they would spend a day with us riding around in the ambulance and going on calls. And ultimately, it helped them have a better understanding of what it was like to go to an overdose at 3 o'clock in the morning on the 5th floor of an apartment building and the elevator's not working. To have that understanding and have that knowledge help them make better decisions when I would call on the radio and it'd say, hey, I need help, or I need to talk to a doctor about a situation. So fast forward to news and to what we're working with now. I think having that institutional knowledge of what it's like to actually be in the field, and when your reporters, anybody, any of your field staff come back and say, look, this is not going to work, and this is why, and having that trust and having that relationship and that understanding that, okay, I do believe what this person's saying, and I don't think they're trying to pull a fast one to get out of work. Because ultimately I think that there is that feeling, and I know I've been watching the chat over on the side here, and a lot of people have been commenting about management, and yes, it takes very good management to have a very good team, and newsroom leaders are essential in this industry. Talking about safety training, yes, things like situational awareness are super important. Situational awareness was one of the first things that I learned when I worked in public safety, and it kept me safe for 20 some years. But unless you have been in the military or were in public safety or something like that, you probably never had anybody talk to you about situational awareness and how to kind of be proactive versus being reactive when things occur, and sort of reading the environment around you. But it even goes more than that. It goes more than situational awareness training, and that's a very, very tiny slice of my safety pie, so to speak. When I talk to journalists about safety, and I just a week and a half ago, I got home from Bangladesh. I did a 4-day workshop with investigative journalists in Dhaka, Bangladesh, all about safety and security. I look to the newsroom managers, I look to the leaders in the industry to say, look, when new employees come on board, and the reality is you may be getting fresh out of college, first job, that there needs to be a level of safety education for all personnel coming to work in this industry. And, right now, I'm realistic. Sometimes it's tick the box. It's okay, this is where the fire extinguisher is, this is where the first aid kit is, and we're good to go. But the environment has changed, and journalists are being targeted, journalists are being harassed in situations, like an MMJ where it's one person working by themselves. There needs to be some element of, hey, okay, this is what you learned, but this is kind of how we're going to do things here, and have a strong management that supports that.
But again, let me jump in real quick here.
Yes.
I understand that. And I understand that you're teaching, you can teach me everything about situational awareness out in the field. But again, if, case in point, this is what I heard from many, that after this happened to this young woman, right? After she was almost killed out live on TV, the next day, what did some of these managers say? Don't forget to wear your vest.
Right.
I even saw it in some of the chats on Facebook.
Right.
She wasn't wearing her vest. Come on. So what I'm saying to you is, yeah, I get all the training you're doing.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, when do the managers listen? What I guess in the training that you do, what training do you give the managers in order to make it productive and positive?
Right. So I try to equate this to dollars, because if somebody gets injured on the job, there's a financial cost associated with that. I actually have a question for Sherry and for Drew. Where does the employer responsibility fall under something like the OSHA General Duty Clause to provide, a safe working environment? Where as an industry, we're saying, hey, look, you know, there are situations that journalists, and look, I think we all can agree that over the last, you know, few years, maybe the last 10 years at this point, I don't know, it's kind of hard to say, the environment for journalists have gotten more complicated. Domestic journalists have gotten more complicated. Where does it come back to the employer responsibility to provide a safe working environment? Because when I meet with newsroom managers, I try to equate safety with the financial aspects of it. If you have an employer who chooses to kind of shy away from that, there's enforcement issues, there's legal issues, there's the possibility of litigation and fines from regulatory agencies for not providing a safe working environment.
Let me go to Sherry first on that, because you know you deal with HR.
I see her shaking her head. Yeah,
I've been chomping at the bits on this one. On that, there's a couple of things, and I know we have a short amount of time, and so let me do my disclaimer here. I am not pointing fingers or blame at anyone. What I found when the young lady jumped up and said, "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, everything's okay, I'm going to continue," that was adrenaline. That was also trained in her, say, "It's okay, it's all good, it's all good." So there's a shared responsibility. Everyone here, including Sherry, there is a shared responsibility, because it's become cliche during the pandemic, but it's okay to say I'm not okay. And so I would love to be a fly on the wall of the conversations that were said and maybe even coaxed as to I'm okay. We need to let people know when we're not okay. I'm hurt, I'm scared, I don't feel comfortable. So when we come into the listening part of it, we have to articulate how we are feeling, because many times we speak about what we don't want versus what we do want. And I'm gonna say that again for the people in the back of the room. Okay. We verbalize what we don't want versus what we do want. Because basically what we do is we complain about, well, I can't stand to do this and I don't want to do this. And all that person is hearing is what you don't want. We have to articulate what we do want. And so I did read some of that anonymous blog. And there was one, I think it was a young lady that said, or I guess it's anonymous, that said they were reporting about the weather or something, and they kind of spun out on the way back. And they were so upset, and they said, never send me to do that type of thing again. And I don't know why I'm saying she, I don't know. The person said, and they never did. So first and foremost, we have to articulate what we're going to do. And then real quickly here, Rebecca, so when it comes to the OSHA, so I cannot speak specifically on that until I look at your handbook policies and procedures. But Chris is absolutely right. There is an OSHA part that's in there that it is going to be, as an employee, when we get the handbook, that we have to look and see what's covered. And Chris is right. We have to put dollars and cents on our CEOs. So what I would be saying is, not in a non-threatening way, but what's the cost of you not giving me help? What's the cost of you not giving me safety support versus that? Because again, the HR person, Rebecca, you were asking me what were my first thoughts. Is she okay? Let's talk about how to never do this again. But I'm thinking, as an HR person, being that advocate for both sides, is she okay? But then I'm going to that CEO going, hey, listen, I worked 6 months with the rail car manufacturing company in Northeast Arkansas about behavior-based safety. They were about to get to the point, because they were cash rich, get to the point where they were about to have another infraction that their butt could not cash a check. Because OSHA was like, we don't care how much money you got. I call it the Mark Cuban, Mark Cuban is like, I don't care, I'm going to go out and I'm going to behave badly because I can, on a particular playoff game. So there has to be a shared responsibility. So I'm going to first say, read your handbook. Most times we look at a handbook and we sign it just like we sign our tax returns. We don't know what's in there.
Let me jump in here real quick. Drew, again, you're the one that's called, and I know you're not an employment attorney, but you're the one that says, that's not a good area to be in, and
Yes.
That's okay. But you're looking out for their safety. Your point of view and what Chris was saying.
You have to, take OSHA aside for a second. You have to have a culture of safety as an organization. And that, in today's environment, can cost some money, but that is part of providing the service that we provide to our viewers, readers, whatever, because that's just what it takes in today's world to do what we do. You might be surprised to learn that there are some things that CNN just won't do because it's too dangerous, because it would be so costly, right, to endeavor in that kind of high wire act journalism, right? And that's because safety is the #1 priority in that realm. We have a culture of that at CNN, and many of your newsrooms do too. But that requires everybody from the top down, right, to have that same embrace, and that requires HR to be there for that phone call from the new hire journalist who says, "I don't feel good about this," to not nudge them back out, right, but to protect them, right, and help them not be retaliated against or whatever that might be, so that that culture of safety is what's paramount. And somebody asked in the chat, which I think is really, really good, how do you say no? That's hard, right? But it's the same answer. Management has to have a culture of safety, right? If you have that culture, then saying no is recognized as somebody not feeling comfortable, right? And so that's heard. But if you don't, then it sounds like the fingernails on the chalkboard, somebody complaining. So you have to come to the conversation in the right frame of reference, but everybody's got to be on the same page. And you don't have to have the bells and whistles, right, to have all of the safety. I'm sure that Chris can give you a long list of very affordable or even free apps or techniques, right, that you can utilize for safety purposes. We all have iPhones, right? If you're ever going out solo, turn on your location sharing with your news director and share your location, and poof, all of a sudden they know exactly where you are unless your phone gets lost, damaged, or destroyed, right? And so that's one simple thing, and I'm sure Chris has tons and tons more tricks like that. And obviously I have a much larger arsenal of tools than just that I can employ. But stations should think about what are the other things that we can do.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Shay. Shay, I gotcha.
Yes.
Shay is an MMJ. She was on assignment. She's on our panel. Thank you for joining us. I know that you're working right now. You've been hearing this whole conversation. One of the things that I think I admire about you is you're willing to start the conversation with your news managers. And I applaud your news director for letting you come here and talk honestly. But you've been at stations where you've said, I'm going to start this conversation. I'm going to continue this conversation. You're going to listen to me. I like that. But on the other hand, you can be the squeaky wheel that they think, hey, when's Shay's contract coming up? Bye-bye, Shay. So tell me about that. How do you build that bridge without getting to the point where you're thinking they're going to get rid of me?
Absolutely. And I would also just like to tell everyone I'm speaking from, an angle of an MMJ and also a young MMJ. I have less than 5 years of experience in this industry. I'm only at my second market. But I had to come into the situation, no matter what newsroom that I was in, that I was going to speak because I deserve to be heard. No matter how long I had been in that station or how long I've been in the industry, my safety comes first. And so what I would say when it comes to that situation, yeah, I may be the squeaky wheel, but as MMJs and as a person who works for someone, you have to decide when your enough is too much. You have to decide if you want to put your safety over your job, or if you want to put your job first. I have a line that I just won't cross, and I am willing and in good faith, if my safety was in danger and I felt that someone wasn't listening to me, and I knew that there was a possibility I may get fired, then that's what would have happened. And so I think as MMJs, we have to put a line on what we will and will not tolerate. And I think that is okay to do. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be at a station who doesn't respect your safety, right? The station that I'm at right now, it's not by chance. It's because I told them what my lines were. And guess what? The newsroom culture was already well within my line. So it just wasn't, an arch. I can even tell a situation that happened literally yesterday. There is here in our market, I wasn't MMJing at that moment because this might have been it was a protest. So there would be not a situation where I would ever MMJ during a protest. But although I still had a photographer, the protest was happening in a private residence. And when we knew that, and we had a live shot at 4 o'clock, but the protest didn't start till 5, I put in the chat, hey, this is in a private residence. We're not going to be going live at a private residence until there are other protesters or something else happening out of there. We don't feel safe. You know what? Everyone's like, yeah, oh, of course. Yep. As soon as they found out there was no pushback, there was no, well, maybe can you go a little bit outside? It was what I said. I had assessed the situation and what I said was going. Now I had to be prepared. Let's say if I was somewhere else, if that person said no, what would I be willing to do? So you have to have those clear lines and know that this is cliche. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for it, for anything and everything.
Very well said. Definitely.
I think what Shay just said was so phenomenal in that, Rebecca, you started off by saying you have a voice. And so what Shay did is she used her voice. She used it in an articulate way. She used it in a way that she was already pre-thinking, if this happens, then B happens. And if this happens, then this happens. And she was willing to be okay with it. And so I saw somebody else in the chat. So basically what Shay is saying is set boundaries. And she articulated it as such. Here are my boundaries. And whether we're MMJs or we're HR people, because let me tell you, I've had to terminate some people where, we've had to get in state troopers, that kind of thing. So we all kind of have those safety issues there, but Shay put it perfectly. So hats off to you, Shay, for that.
And I think it's also, you set the tone. When you're interviewing, I often, and I'm sure there's news directors who know me that I've turned down. I said, what are you looking for? Do you want an assertive reporter or do you want a puppet? Because I'm not a puppet. Do you want someone, and in my case, being a Latina, right? Do you just want a Latina who fills a slot or do you want a Latina who does the job right? You set the tone at the interview, because that's what, if they put us out there to get the goods from the police chief, the politicians, hey, we're chasing them with a microphone, then we should be able to use that energy, that voice, that strength inside the newsroom. And that's why I have survived, but I've been fired too, because I have been known as the squeaky wheel, but look at me, I'm still standing. So if you have a voice, use it. Have the power to do that.
And Rebecca, I'd like to add, everyone's not like me and you, right? There are some MMJs, no matter what we say right now, they're still going to be afraid, and for good reason. So I want the people who are like me and you to stand by their sides. I want the loudest people in the newsroom. I want our anchors. I want, our people who may have a little bit more sway in the newsroom to say, hey, maybe that person has a point. You don't have to go gung-ho and, try to make all the blocks fall down, but the people who are a little bit louder in the newsroom, who feel like they can say something, you cannot be silent. You have to say something.
The beauty of having people like Drew and Amy, who, again, they show us, Amy, looking at you, it seems like you don't allow in your newsroom where they go, okay, you know what, you're going to go live or else. You don't allow those kind of attitudes. How do you make sure that it's a ripple effect, a domino effect of positive managing that then ultimately affects the MMJ?
It's just understanding, again, it goes back to understanding the entire picture. So everyone has to have a conversation. All the managers are involved in the conversation. And I'm speaking on terms of other stations I've been at. I've only been at KATV here for a little over a month, but I've worked in severe weather markets and dealt with hurricanes and stuff like that. And showing, if I'm going to be out running a live shot for somebody, then there's a reason why. There's no one too good to step outside of the newsroom and help someone else. But encouraging them to say, hey, maybe we need to think about this different, or think about, is there another way I can still provide this for you? But having those conversations, and I understand that Shamarria's boundaries, that those are perfectly fine, but as a whole, as the MMJ culture as a whole, it's not just saying, no, I won't do this, period. It's explaining why, and then also saying, but I can give you this. You kind of have to understand that the news is still going to go on. We're still going to have these things and have to have these conversations. So it's I can't do this because this isn't safe, but I can do this because this is safe. And there has to be give and take.
And let me, one more thing, because we're going to go into questions, because I mean, this hour and a half goes fast. Yeah, but you know, Amy, some of you news directors hire those consultants, and those consultants say live, live, live. And what's drilled into the producers, because they want to meet the needs of the consultants that were hired by the news managers, is live, live, live. So,
well,
you know,
the consultant doesn't, make the calls in my newsroom. I have them, but they can say what they want, but ultimately, if it is an issue for my people, I have to trust my people. And that's where, and I know there are a few other news managers on here, there are a few other news directors on here. You have to understand that your people have to come first. And yeah, okay, the consultant is there and they have one vision, and that vision is usually to make your station fall in line with a company vision. You can still fall in line with a company vision and keep your people safe. It's just you knowing that you have to stand up and be that voice for your people.
thank you. In another world, I would have worked for you. But anyway, let me bring up, you know, one of the things real quick. I just want to call out some people. I admire some people about, you know, call for action. These are journalists or former journalists who thought, you know, I need to do something. It wasn't some big TV news guru who wrote a book or anything like that. These are just regular people who thought, I'm hearing the MMJ. Let's bring up Nia Curtis. She started a blog called Anonymous Local TV Journalist, collecting stories. Go to Twitter, you guys, hashtag MMJ Stories. Nia, you are a journalist, a former MMJ, former television anchor. Why was it important for you to talk about this, to get those stories out there? Tell us about that real quick.
So like you and Shay, I'm also a squeaky wheel, right? And I think anchors have a huge responsibility to be leaders in the newsroom, right? You have the voice, you have the platform. And my perspective has been, you know, the last 5 years, I will say, we've watched our industry really shift to hiring more and more young journalists without the wealth of experience. And as an anchor, you have to gauge whether they know well enough to say no, right? Whether they know if an area is safe to go. And I just have been in so many journalism Facebook groups. Shay, I think you're in a couple of them too. And there are so many people who are afraid, I'm telling you, just terrified to speak up because they're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of retaliation. And I've seen it. And
Right.
It's not the flat out, you're fired the next day. It's insidious. It happens bit by bit. You're left out of this.
Let me push this forward though. Yeah, and I understand all that, but what I'm saying is you're not putting out their stories on Twitter. Obviously, with not their names.
Right.
Some of them are really like, I mean, sexual assault, things like that.
Right.
Why was it important to get those stories out? What do you think you'll get out of this, and what will it do for that person that you're sharing their story? Do you think it's empowering or what?
I think from some of the responses I've gotten, it is empowering. They just want to let it out, because I think there's one thing where you can tell your friends, and there's another thing where you're still staying silent, right? You want to let everybody know what it's really like. And it is very hard. Even in our case, we all know that's being recorded. We know there are things that you could say and you cannot say, right? But when you're anonymous, you do have that safety guard. And I have not, I've been really careful with editing, trying to make sure that, Sherry, you can't tell if it's a male or a female, right? You don't know who they are. And I think that lets you really get a picture of what it's like. I mean, people are just being flat out honest about the things that have happened to them, how they feel. I know I read one which was like, I feel dehumanized. And I've seen that over and over. Empathy came up a lot. A lot of MMJs and reporters even who've written in are talking about how they just don't feel heard. Even if they speak up, they don't feel heard. They feel that there's either a pushback or someone dismisses their safety or laughs at it or jokes that, well, you made it back alive, you didn't die, but there's trauma. There's a lot of trauma that people are talking about in here.
I think the good thing that you're doing with this is you're getting the stories out there. And I hope the people who shared these stories anonymously, that they will feel empowered and feel that they know that they're being heard out there. So I want to thank you for getting those hashtag MMJ stories out there. I recommend all of you look at it, especially news managers and producers, to see what these people are feeling, sometimes in silence, and sometimes these are people that are just walking. And I don't want to lose any more great storytellers. Nia, thank you so much for that. Let me go to Chloe Kipple. She's a former MMJ and now in public relations. She started a petition on change.org, almost 2,000 signatures. It's an open letter to local TV industry, prioritize reporter safety, stop solo live shots. Chloe, come up and talk to us about that. What do you hope by getting these signatures? What do you hope you'll get out of this? How do you think you'll improve on the MMJ system or these people doing this job? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to see all the passion behind this issue. And I know for me, when I saw the Tori Yergi video, I was literally sickened that day. I couldn't work. I was just so distracted and thinking about this. And I saw so much discussion in all of these different journalism forums on Facebook and otherwise. And I just wanted to do something productive, and I didn't know what that was. But for me, I thought if we can write a letter and just get the point across that we want to stop solo live shots, and that's it. I thought if there's one tangible thing that we can do to reduce danger on the job, and obviously there's so many different safety considerations that need to be made, that should be made for a lot of different things, but this is an easy one that we can solve, and that's ending solo live shots. And so for me, that was kind of the crux of this letter. And right now it has almost 1,900 signatures, which I'm so excited to see. And it's been really empowering, devastating, but empowering to see all of these different comments as to why people are signing. Some are MMJs themselves who have been in so many, dangerous situations, myself included, and others are family members who don't want to see their loved ones endangered on the job. And so for me, I hope that this kind of advances the conversation, and I'm also working on public relations efforts to get this in front of news managers and also companies. But one thing that has been really shocking is the silence from so many organizations in the journalism community. I've reached out to numerous advocacy groups, so to speak, and have heard no response about this petition. And so I just hope that this grassroots effort can kind of stimulate this discussion and hopefully push for change moving.
Thank you so much, Chloe. And I will say that the Society of Professional Journalists, along with the SPJ Georgia chapter, we talked about it last week at our national board meeting, and we knew we needed to move on this. And I'm so proud of the chapter and the national board for realizing that we needed to move on this. I'm not sure what the other organizations are planning to do. I hope they do something because if we put more effort into this, we can improve the system and at the same time not lose great storytellers. And that's important because, in the end, who loses out? The public. They'll lose great people. So we have a half hour. Oh my gosh, she went fast. Nicolle is going to ask us, tell us the questions out there. I would love to open the mic to everybody, but we have half an hour. And so I want to make sure our panelists are able to answer those questions. Again, to all of you in the chat, I wish I could read everything. This is not our first conversation. We're going to have more. As the president of this organization, I promise you, we're going to have more. But it's good to start right now. So, Nicolle, what's one of the questions out there?
Yeah, one of the questions that came kind of early on, and we haven't really touched on this, I think it is really important. What can be done? I think probably Sherry might be best to answer this, like from a contract standpoint, as MMJs are getting into their jobs. And this kind of gets into another question as well, talking about like entry-level employees and what they're looking at as they come into a newsroom for the first time. What should they be looking at in their contracts to ensure their safety, so that they can go back to that and pull that out and use that, you know, when they are talking to their managers and producers and say like, hey, I don't feel safe. And you know what, this isn't just me saying no because I'm saying no, but like I have this here when I signed it, when I started working here, when they feel like they need that extra something to, what can they do?
Great question.
I think first and foremost, read your contract. I hate to say that, but you have to read your contract. And there are positions before I became self-employed that I turned down because there was some small print, and they were surprised, like, oh, you actually read it. I'm like, yeah, I did on that. So you want to read that. But again, you want to be able to speak out your concerns. And let me even back up. When you're interviewing, there should be a 50-50 conversation and asking questions back and forth. Because many times we want the job, sometimes we're intimidated, or sometimes we're overwhelmed, and we just kind of sit back. Because I, as an HR person with recruiting, I kind of judge who I'm going to hire. Are you going to ask me questions? Well, I don't have any questions. Ask me questions other than holiday pay and all that good stuff. So ask questions. Ask about, what is your culture? What is your culture about safety? What is your culture about open door? Well, we have an open door policy. You know what? That's great. Tell me how that works. And if they fumble, next. So you want to ask those questions, ask those educated questions. You guys have a great, there's 112 of us total on here. And you guys are sharing in the chat what you've done, what you haven't done. Shay's talked about what's been successful. Go ahead and network and say, hey, what did you ask that worked? What should I be asking for? So first, read the contract. 2, ask them about that. Hey, so let me ask you in a perfect world, or let me ask, so if I were to go out for a live shot and it's 3 a.m. and it's da-da-da-da-da-da, and I already know, let's say I already know about the neighborhood, or I've already had experience with that, and I don't quite feel safe, how would you handle that with me?
Let me jump in real quick here. Someone has worked in small markets, medium markets, larger markets too. First of all, to anybody, even if you're a beginning person, you find a contract lawyer. A lot of times they charge maybe $100 an hour. And even you can even tell them, look, I have no money, and they'll help you out. Because we used to work in Corpus Christi, and I worked in Toledo, Ohio. And I remember getting those people because I didn't know anything about it. And they brought things up to, okay, in this legal language, this, but you have to have someone look at your contract. I don't know how many people, even veterans, I could name a few, just sign the contract. You have to have someone read it. That is key.
Yeah, and there's somebody here in the chat that asked me about that when it comes to young journalists about that. So here's the thing, whatever state that you are in, there is a local bar. So it's your city, there's always a city bar, there's a state bar, there's a county bar, there's the national bar on national levels. Those attorneys have to do a certain percentage of pro bono work. Reach out and ask. Go to that Texas bar, go to that Plano bar. I'm talking about because I'm here in Texas, or Chicago. You got Cook County, all of those things, and say, hey, listen, I have a contract that I need looked at. Can you help me? That's free. Or sometimes they will even do it at low cost. I know I'm going to sound a little bootleg here, but it works. I also have Legal Shield, and Legal Shield is nationwide. And they will turn around and they will look at your contracts for you. So there's help out there. All we have to do is make sure, again, articulate on what you want and not what you don't want. So if you want help on it, go ahead and ask. So all the bars, all the level of bars will be able to help you with that, either low or no cost.
And let me jump in before I forget. This is something, again, Drew and I had talked before coming on to this. One of the things that Drew told me that I recall when I worked at the Fox station in Dallas is I knew the attorney that was over the Fox affiliate. So I could call her in New York and go, okay, I remember Homeland Security was trying to throw me off the sidewalk when I was trying to get video of undocumented workers that they were bringing in, and they came out in full force. And I said, I'm on the sidewalk. And I called the attorney right away. And she's like, Rebecca, are you on the sidewalk? I said, yes. And they're telling me they could arrest me. She's like, you are on the sidewalk. Tell them that you're talking to the Fox attorney, you're on the sidewalk, it is public property. And so that's good to know your attorney. And it wasn't like I was going over my news director. I needed answers now. One of the things, Drew, that you said is get to know the attorney that represents your station. Is that true? And why?
Absolutely. I mean, look, some of you might be rolling your eyes. Oh, here comes CNN guy again talking about
No,
resources.
no, they're not.
But
No.
listen to this. I know all of your lawyers because we're all friends. You have great attorneys, whether you're at an O&O station, whether you're at Great TV or Sinclair, and there's not that many companies out there, and that's a different issue. But I know all of them, and they're all great attorneys, and they're great people, and they have the same approach that I do, which is everybody gets that phone call, and you have to hear somebody out because it might actually be a really important issue, right? And so they're all approachable, and don't feel like you're going around management or anything like that. My job is to sort of sometimes be that sideways outlet around management occasionally if there is an issue, right? And so don't be shy about getting that number and putting it in your pocket in case of an emergency. That's what we're here for.
Wonderful. I did pop in the chat, and it popped up. Mary Cavallaro from SAG-AFTRA. Thank you so much for this information. She says SAG-AFTRA will review your employment contract as a courtesy, member or not. No charge and confidentiality. We have offices around the country. Mary, everybody jot down her email. Get that out there. Look at that. By the way, I was a member of SAG when I was in Los Angeles. So thank you for that information. All right, Nicolle, what's the next question, please?
Yeah. A lot of people are asking about station management and people who control the budget, and there being questions about how ultimately this comes down to safety versus budget concerns, and do we have enough people to actually send out multiple people and get rid of solo live shots? So I guess for anybody here who wants to answer really on the panel, I think
what's the question? Is the question budgets over people or what?
What can be done when you're up against the money concern?
Amy.
Well, so as a news director, I will tell you our budget is usually what our budget is. We're usually handed, this is what you have for people. So that's where it comes into play, is as a news manager being creative. And that's where you as a reporter going out in the field, asking questions. Hey, is there someone who can go with me? If your buddy that you have that is also an MMJ is done with their story, ask them to go with you. There's other ways around it to do those things. And look, and I will tell you this as someone who's worked in markets where I have photographers and worked in markets where I have one photographer. It is you have to speak up, because it's not that we don't want to have those people for you. If we have to choose between having a photographer and being able to pay you a livable wage, I would rather pay you a livable wage and me be your photographer. So this is like a twofold conversation that is constantly happening. And I understand that pay in this industry is an issue and it's a huge hot button for everyone. But I need you to also think about that is, do you want a livable wage and to still be able to do something you're very passionate about? Or do you want to work with your people that are already in your building and ask your management, hey, can we find a way to do this? But you have to advocate for yourself. I know that, and I've heard this, and I've gotten a lot of negative feedback from people on Twitter that it's on management. Yes, it is on management, but sometimes you have managers who haven't been in the field. Ask them, can you come out with me for a day and see what I'm doing? Ask them to do it. Put it on them. That there's other ways to do this and have that conversation. Message me on Twitter. I will help you. I will coach you through that. Talk to Shay. She's very good at this, and that's quite obvious. So you have to be your advocate, because I don't know what you're experiencing unless you speak your mind, because I don't read it.
Exactly. And I
Thank you
think
so much for that, Amy.
I think
Management-
one of the things that I admire about Amy is that, and let me just thank the news directors. I know who you are, you're in here, and the producers, I see many of you. Thank you for joining the conversation, because you can take it back, and all of us can take it back to share and to hopefully open some minds, open some hearts that have been programmed the wrong way, in my opinion. Nicolle, next question, please. And again, you know, this hour and a half is going fast. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's a question again about kind of, you know, that pushback that you might get if you say, no, I don't want to do this. Shay and Jared can kind of answer this. And, you know, that somebody said, like, if you won't do it as an MMJ, we'll go find somebody else who will. And kind of how can you, you know, when you say no and you say this is my boundary, kind of continue to, you know, what can you do when you say this is my boundary and they kind of say, well, okay, then we'll find somebody else who can do it.
Shay,
Yeah.
Jared?
I'll go first. Well, I think, well, an example for me during the pandemic when sports were basically no more at my last station, I essentially turned into a news reporter, and I was by myself. And you know, around the time when the protests started happening around the country, there were some in Birmingham as well. And you know, they were trying to figure out who to send where, or who knew the best communities or who had a good relationship with whatever community. And so, I mean, obviously when you're entering a protest or a riot, it's a dangerous element from the beginning. So you should obviously expect the worst. So I was talking to some people in the station, some people who were in management roles, and I was saying, you know, I don't really want to go out here by myself, because who knows what could happen to me, and I don't feel comfortable. And you know, I had management say, "Oh, well, just go out there for a quick second. If nothing's out there, then don't worry about it. But we need a camera out there." So that was essentially my pushback. And so it's more of a, I think in my experience, it wasn't all right, well, we'll find somebody else. It's more so like, let's just not make it a big deal. Let's when you get out there, let's see what you get. And then if you don't feel comfortable, then we'll make a decision. So it's like, you know, it's never, in my situation, it was never, all right, well, we'll just find someone else to do it. You're not helping the team. It's more of a, well, let's just see what's out there and then we'll go from there. So
But the bottom line
that
is,
was my experience.
but Jared, the bottom line is you still spoke up. One way or another, you still spoke up, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did a lot of that at my last station, actually.
Yeah. Shay?
I echo those things. I think it's that middle ground of this is what I can give you, though. I am all about solutions. And so I'll go right back to yesterday when there was it was a protest in residential area. We just didn't go up close, but they still got a live shot. You know, was able to take a live look into it. So you have to be able to find that middle ground with your station about what I can give you. Hey, I'm not able to go live, but I can go a little bit further and maybe give you a look live or go live from there. So I think when you're finding that middle ground, I think everyone can respect the decision and we can put safety first, but also have a story with us as well.
And I think that's important.
Real quick.
Always have an option, because, you know, you do, I produce very little in my TV career, but you do count on that report. But if you have an option for the producer, like, look, this is not a good part of Dallas, I'd rather move to the police department. I know it's a boring background, but I'll save her. Okay, I just need a live shot. But at least you give them what they need, because they are under the pressure to have a great show. But at the same time, you put yourself out of danger. Giving them an option helps. And I think that's a good producer. Once you have that trust and respect, you know, will know, what do you got? What's the option here? Because
decline with solutions. You guys are talking about declining with solutions.
Yeah, and so, you know, because they too have the EPs over their head, and the EP has the, you know, another manager of them, and it's a ripple effect, that kind of thing. Nicolle, what's the next question, please?
Yeah, I know we're kind of reaching the end of our time, and I kind of want to give all of the panelists the opportunity to answer this one. So I'll go ahead and ask it, and if we have any others that we can continue with, then we'll try to do that as well. But how do we continue this conversation and actually make change after this? I know that, you know, as SPJ, we, you know, want to continue the conversation and keep talking about it, but, you know, from you guys in newsrooms, what can be done to actually make this change?
Amy?
I think that was, that was part of the reason why I agreed to doing this, is I've had this conversation with my boss, not just my general manager, but my regional, and I've shared this with Rebecca. I work for Sinclair. Yes, Sinclair gets a bad rap, but Sinclair is also run by photographers. So being a company that has photographers all the way at the top, my boss was a photographer. That's something that they understand as someone who's been in the field. It is about storytelling, and there is other ways to keep people safe. So to continue to be able to talk to him about how we can do this as a whole in our company is part of the reason why I agreed to do this.
Thank you, Amy. And before I forget, because I want the rest of the panel to answer this, MMJs are everywhere, okay? Not just in the small markets. They're in Dallas, they're in New York, they're in Los Angeles, I know that. They're not just young people, by the way. There's also veterans. I know many veterans who are now MMJs, but still, even though they've been in the business forever, they still don't have that oomph to tell that news director, hey, you know, you're putting me in the worst part of this city or whatever. So let's stop thinking it's just young people. No, there's people my age out there doing it, and they're afraid to speak up because they figure, well, they're already trying to get rid of them for their age, right? And it's not only in small markets. They're in New York City, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, they're everywhere. So let's remember, this is a conversation to help them all out there. All right, Drew, do you wanna, how can we change the system? How can we help?
Sure. I mean, this is a great start. And I think the important thing to any journalist out there is always surface the issues. You know, management might not know what's happening every single part of the organization. And some of you, I see in the chat, you know, I work for this very, very large, conglomerate that owns 100 stations around the country, right? They're not going to listen to little old me. Well, they might not even know that it's an issue, right? Because maybe it's unique to your market, or maybe it's not, but maybe other people haven't raised their voices and said, hey, this is a problem. But then on the management side, you have to be open to always learning and adapting. At CNN, the way we do things today is no way close to how we did them last year or the year before, and definitely not the year before that, right? And so you have to always learn, always adapt, and figure out how to make it all work while still putting on amazing world-class television that the viewers need, right? And so both of those things, so surface the issues up, and then management has to be adaptive.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yeah, trying to keep the human in human resources here. I've been trying to shy away from this, but document, document, document.
I agree.
That's my HR song that I sing when I do training. And I go back to articulate. So when you feel unsafe, when you feel, and we're talking about safety right now, but we've been talking also about retaliation. So I'm going to tell you, the Department of Labor does not look kindly upon retaliation. But I'm going to do a Judge Judy on you. You notice Judge Judy says, if you don't have proof, it did not happen. So you have to document, 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 document how you feel, document the instances that happen, document when you've gone to management and talked to them about that, go to HR and document about that. You want to document, but when you document your communication and what you're articulating, you want to make sure you're not, people don't take to ultimatums very well. And sometimes when we say, well, I talked to somebody, well, no, you didn't talk to them, you gave them an ultimatum. So it has to come from a conversation, especially with management, because what I'm going to tell you, when you come to someone with an ultimatum, the guard goes up. The legal guard goes up, the conversation guard goes up, the trust. We've been talking about the trust. So initially go at it. I'm not saying it's going to solve everything, but document, 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 talk to them. I'm going to also talk about what Drew and what Amy and what Shay said is, you know, you want to decline, but with solutions. in HR, one of the people, when we talk about who we keep and who we don't, it's who came with, I'm just unhappy versus who came with, I'm unhappy, articulate why, and then come up with possible solutions. So again, document where there's been unsafe situations, document with an attorney, about your contract and all that good stuff. So start with a good contract, have someone look at it. We've given you resources on that. Make sure that you document your conversations, document the conversations you have with yourself. Because many times you're out there in the action of things and you kind of forget, and then it's 6 weeks later and you kind of, okay, well, I want to piece this together. So, we got good old iPhone with voice memos. That's how I'm writing my book on that. So yes, document, and articulate what you want, not what you don't want. And I think that's a good journey to have.
And one more thing, you're all journalists, right? I mean, I've done stories with OSHA, the Labor Department, the EEOC. Those are the same people you're going to call if I need to tell you something that's going on in my company. Why not? Use those same sources that you use for stories to help you. Because believe me, I know my OSHA rep here. I know the guy from the US Labor Department. I know the EEOC. Because why? I've used them for stories. Use them for stories. You can use them for personal reasons. Why not? Remember that. All right.
Let me say this. Let me come back to one more thing. So when you talk to them, and maybe it's a good idea to be proactive and talk to them, because many times what they're going to do is go back and tell you to do the same thing HR told you to do. Yeah. So we are friendly with each other. Yes.
Also, let me see let me go to Chris before I go to the MMJ reporter. Chris, your thoughts on improving the system?
So I think we have to continue the conversation. I think we have to keep moving on and keep talking about safety and trying to figure out ways that we can improve the industry. Tradition is a killer. And when I hear, oh, we've always done it this way, we've always done it this way. Well, okay, that may have worked at that time, but tradition is a killer. And we have to continue to evolve as a profession. We have to embrace a culture of safety. We have to treat people like humans. We have to treat them with respect and give them dignity. And when somebody, says, look, I don't feel comfortable about this, don't second guess them. Don't treat them, like a disposable piece of equipment. We're humans, and we have to look, we're all in this together. I don't care who you work for. We're all in the trenches together, and we all have to look out for each other. And I love y'all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just a reminder that when we lose good people, again, the public loses out, but then the company, when we're talking about finances, it costs money for that company to replace you, by the way. So they may be making a ton of money, per quarter, but it costs money to replace you. So, because I get calls from news directors and all the time, I need people. Let's go to Jared or Shayla. How can we do things better? And we may go over time a little bit. I hope you don't mind, but we will be ending soon.
So how to, obviously, I think continuing the conversation, not just with us, but, the more managers, the more GMs, the people who, control the structure of the business, whether you're with Tegna, Sinclair, Gray, CNN, NBC, Fox, whatever the case may be, the more executives, the more people in power ahead of just journalists or even EPs or producers. I think that's a way to make everyone aware. And just also, just for your own individual success, documentation is very important. I've learned that documenting things that you have issues with can go a long way. And also be open, be able to have conversations with your manager, say, hey, I don't like, this doesn't work for me. I don't like this. And obviously you have a goal as a manager to see things through. So how can we meet in the middle if there's a way to compromise? Because obviously news directors have a job to do, EPs have a job to do, the reporter has a job to do. So there's a lot of different elements there, but I think compromising and being able to say, hey, this may work for your investigative reporter, but for me, how do we make this work? So I think, trying to figure out what works for you and not trying to put yourself in the general population of just the newsroom,
A lot of moving parts here. Shay.
So I want to start with saying, the MMJs who are having this conversation, we're having it because we're passionate about our jobs. We're having it because we want to stay. We want to be changed. We're not having it because we want to cause trouble. We're not having it because we want to maybe end the MMJ system. That's not why we're having it. Imagine how we're advocating for ourselves, that we will be advocating for a little girl who, may have experienced a situation and we're advocating on behalf of her in a news story. So these are the people that you have in your newsrooms, and you have to look at it that way. And to the question of how do we continue the conversation, when people say put your money where your mouth is, well, we need to start putting our employment where we feel safe. So you have to be very specific about what jobs you take. You have to be thorough about them, and you cannot just go into a job by chance. You have to do it right. You have to ask the right questions if you want the right results. And if anyone wants to know how I did it, again, you can email me on Twitter as Morrison-TV. I think we all need to be transparent in how things are at our station, so that we can either say, oh, I don't know if you should be there, but we also need to be transparent and say, hey, maybe you should come here. It's a twofold conversation, and I think that's how we continue, because then they know that we're serious about our safety.
And there we have it. Shay, you need to run for president, my friend. Very good advice from everybody. Well, we'll have to wrap up now. I want to thank you, Amy, Jared, Shay, Drew, Sherry, and Chris, for being here, for giving us your expertise, really talking from the heart. I also want to thank Nicolle Sartain, Mark Woolsey, and Michelle Watson with the SPJ Georgia chapter. This was their idea. And it just happened that National said, yes, let's do it. To all of you who came today, take this information we learned, empower yourself and empower others. Share this recording with your news team, your news director, your station manager. It can't hurt. Let's help MMJs thrive and survive. Let's continue this conversation, and believe me, SPJ will. And remember, the Society of Professional Journalists is here to defend you, protect you, help you, and even give you a pat on the back when you need it. And from me, the president, I hope you will join us, because you see what we're doing. We are hearing you. And if you haven't yet, well, now's the time. So until next time, everybody, thank you. Have a great Saturday. Have a great day. And until next time, goodbye.
Stay safe. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Next conversation.
Yes. Go Chiefs.
There you go.